Welcome, Mage. I'm Rhino,
And I'm Papa Mage, and this is
the Extreme Casual
MTG
Podcast.
Podcast. Okay, on today's podcast, we are talking about downsizing your Magic collection. Now, when I used to work in corporate business, they did say downsizing, but then this terminology came out to right size things. It was still downsizing. They were just saying, well, we're just going to put the right people in place. And yeah, that made you feel a little bit better, but really it still was downsizing. So we're going to talk about downsizing an MTG collection. And we started out with a lot of cards. Well, we didn't start out with a lot of cards. We started out with a little bit of cards, built up a lot of cards, and then we downsized those. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go over what the problem is. How do you build up all these cards? And what is the trap that you fall into? So this story goes all the way back to when Rhino was 7. And he got his very first big product after he got a couple of packs, okay? Yeah. But his very first big product was...
Deck Builder's Toolkit.
And it was such a great product.
Yeah,
it was okay. We realized very quickly that the Deck Builder's Toolkit wasn't right for him. It might be right for other people, but it definitely was not right for him. So we had started out building a few decks, playing against each other, kind of fumbling around, learning.
Yeah.
And then Rhino started going to Friday Night Magic.
Yeah.
And
people were like, oh, come on. Seriously?
They didn't want to play against him because he had such silly decks. They were just the cards that he could put together because he didn't have a lot of money. And I wasn't about to get a whole bunch of money involved in this. And, you do have to realize that the reason why he was in the game was because it was a way for him to learn to read. And we didn't need to build super powerful decks for that. All we had to do was just have him play. Well, as he was going along, he decided that he wanted to learn how to play better. We tried to find ways of him to play better. We couldn't find it, so we started the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And when we did that, we had to set up a budget because we couldn't do a YouTube channel with no cards. We had to have cards coming in.
Oh, yeah.
So we had budgeted one booster box and whatever Planeswalker decks came out. I think that was pretty much it. We had a little bit of leftover money for, of course, going to Friday Night Magic and and all that. But Rhino was still doing. He was doing. You were trading cards.
Yeah, trading cards,
and
I traded for like the electrostatic pummeler.
Yeah. Now that was when Kaladesh came out, but between M15 and Kaladesh, he was just kind of struggling to build decks, and they just weren't that good. He often came in close to last place. He wasn't always in last place because there was a lot of people that dropped. But then he started learning what other people were playing. And when we were doing Kaladesh, that's when the channel, we were really analyzing all the cards, and we were doing the pre-release cheat sheet, and Rhino had come up with a deck that he wanted to do. And so at the pre-release, he started trading for the cards that he needed. And there was these cards that people just didn't want, and one of them was the electrostatic pummeler.
Yes,
and
as I said,
and there was some that he had to kind of push to get certain cards. But then I think the following week was the big standard tournament. It was like a game day tournament, or I don't know. It was the in-store championship thing.
Yeah,
and he had this
electrostatic pummeler deck. And in case you don't know what it does, when it comes in, you get 3 energy. And you can pay 3 energy, and you can double its power. And so I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna swing with my 1/1. Be like, oh, yeah, I can just take one. Okay. Okay, buff, buff, buff. Okay, I have a 40/40. You die.
Yeah. So, and he would be doing this like on turn 4. He would have a way to buff it up, and then he would double its power, double it again, and double it again. And it was just he went through, and that tournament I think he went 5-0, and he didn't lose a single game. I don't think he even sideboarded anything. You just played the same deck and just rolled over everyone. So now, with that win, he had to do it again.
Yeah.
And so after a while, the Pummeler deck, other people started doing something similar, and they would find a way to defeat his deck. But when Hour of Devastation came out, he knew what decks people were going to go against, or what they were trying to build, and
I had a Planeswalker deck.
So it's a standard, basic Planeswalker deck. This one was the Nicol Bolas Planeswalker deck. And then we, of course, upgraded it a little bit because that's what we were doing on the channel at the time. And Rhino would go in with this silly little Planeswalker deck, and he won. And we posted this deck list on the channel, and other people were copying the deck, and they were winning their tournaments as well because it was just like completely outside the meta. And people were building a certain type of deck, and this just kind of wrecked all those decks.
Oh, yeah.
So Rhino started getting this reputation of doing these oddball decks that just somehow blew everybody out of the water. And then they would figure it out, and then they would come back with something else. And then he would have to like reinvent it again. And really, this was the struggle. And this was the problem of our card collection going up and up and up and up. Because we had to keep coming up with these bizarre decks, and then standard rotation would come in, and all of a sudden you couldn't use a bunch of these cards. You had to buy a bunch of more cards, and then people would watch what he was doing. And so we built up a lot of cards. Amonkhet, we had gotten a whole bunch of cards, and there was just, we got to this point where we realized that what the real problem was. And the real problem was standard.
Yeah, standard.
So Rhino started doing some modern, not that great.
No.
We built some pauper decks, which were really fun.
Oh, yeah.
And we were kind of waning on playing standard, and then people started playing
Commander.
And this is when he just kind of lit up as a brewer, because with Commander, you could use all these old cards that you had, and so all those old cards had value again, and you could just build these bizarre decks, and it didn't really matter if the deck was really, really expensive or if it was really cheap. Just as long as it had a really good synergy, all of a sudden it was fun to play. And that's when we got out of the competitive level of playing and went into more of the fun level of playing. But there's still the trap there. The trap being, well, this card may be useful in a deck. I don't want to get rid of it. And that was the problem, getting, not being able to get rid of cards. But we still went ahead and we started downsizing. And what we would do is we would
Sort all these cards.
organize them. We would put them in boxes by set. And if they didn't fit in the box, we would go through and say, okay, well, we don't need 8 copies of this common, especially a vanilla card. Yeah. Yeah. Shock is a great card, but then eventually it's like, well, we got shock in multiple sets. We don't need all of those. So we started getting rid of some of these cards. And what we did is we would give them to new players that came into the store. And we would often have a pile of cards there that, hey, you're getting started here. Here's some cards to get you started. They're not worth anything. They're just commons, but hey, you can get your decks going and, maybe get the few cards that you need. And, that was a really great feeling.
Yeah.
But then we got this whole idea of traveling in an RV. And there's no way that we were going to put a bunch of cards into storage.
Yeah, 100,000.
Yeah. And we had well over 100,000 cards at one point in time. We now have a tenth of that. And what we do now, of course, is we are building decks. We teach new players, and we're building commander decks to give to new players that are starting out. And we've got this project that Rhino's doing where he wants to launch 100
commander decks.
100 commander players. So each one is going to get one commander deck. And, once they get in and they start playing it, and they just really enjoy it. Commander is definitely our favorite format. And so we've taken a bunch of our excess cards, and those are filtering into these decks, and they get filtered into the cards that we use to teach new players. And we get the help of Magic Kids to give us some extra cards, and we've got other people that have been sending us some stuff, so that helps us build these things. But for our personal decks, what we do is we just kind of order just the cards that we need. We don't buy booster boxes anymore. We don't buy packs. We every now and then we might get some packs from somebody, or we might win something, but that's the only way that we get packs. We don't buy packs anymore. And we'll still do a pre-release every now and then, so we'll get the packs from those. But
those cards are for the new players.
Yeah. Now we still buy like the commander precons, and we'll upgrade those. And then, of course, the name of the game is to get into the mindset of just buying the individual cards that you need, and finding a way of getting out of this trap of, this card might be useful in the future, or it might go up in value in the future. There have been a number of times a new set comes out, and then all of a sudden the card goes from 10 cents up to $5, and he's like, oh, I had 3 copies of that. Well, yeah, you did, but it's not. You got to let go and realize that it's really not that important. That the trading and getting the cards to the point of what you really need is the most important thing.
What do you need?
Yeah. Not what do you want. I know a lot of people want a bunch of these cards, and
I want a Black Lotus.
Yeah, and it is a big trap. So if you're in this situation where you want to downsize your collection, you can do what we did. And of course, the first thing to do is to go through the first initial pass of commons, and sort by the set. And if you've got more than 4 of one of the commons, you probably don't need more than 4. And I could say that this is a 3-step process, but it's more like a
Yeah.
57-step
Yeah.
process.
It's a lot of steps.
And it's a lot of sorting, organizing, realizing that you don't need a bunch of vanilla creatures, that you don't need, 15 shocks, unless you're building decks for other people.
Oh, yeah.
You don't need those, and finding a way of getting those to somebody that can use it. There's, of course, Magic Kids accepts cards, and they will sort through them, and they will ship those out to schools and that have Magic clubs, and so the new kids will be able to sort and get the cards and build decks and have a lot of fun. And so that's kind of the place we would want to push towards, because we went through and we ended up selling a bunch of those cards. We would take in piles of these cards and piles of commons, and they would go, well, okay, here's 1,000, here's $2. And it's like, okay, that just didn't feel right.
Yeah.
But when you give the cards to a new player and you see the excitement and the joy, that is by far and away worth so much more than that $2 that you would have gotten from a game store. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to ask you,
how can we do better?
well, how do you intend to downsize? How could we do better with our downsizing? I mean, I think we've got a pretty cool way of doing it because we're giving cards away. But if you're in this mode of wanting to get your collection down to something a lot more manageable, tell us in the comments. How do you intend to do that? And that way we can see if there's a better way for us. So in future podcast, we're probably going to be talking more about some of these people that we give the cards to and some of those stories. And we've got some incredible stories of people that had a hard time reading or a hard time doing math, a hard time just talking to other people, playing a game, and how this game has really opened them up. So we've got
more videos coming out soon. So until then, me,
Rhino, and me, Papa Mage,
are
shuffle back into the library.